Hi, everyone. This is Tracy Fisher, and I am your host of Paranormal Frequencies on WKDW on Sunday nights at 7:05 p.m. On tonight's show, I have a great guest. Her name is April Wilson, and she has a wonderful story to tell us about her experiences when she lived in Utah. She has a book called Harvesting Shadows, and I would love for her to take the opportunity to share everything about the book. And April, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate your time. And we can just dig in and start from the beginning, and you can just kind of tell us how the story started. And I can, if I feel like I need to ask a question, I'll just kind of jump in. So
Okay.
have at it. Welcome,
Sounds
April.
sounds wonderful. Thank you so much
You're
for
welcome.
taking your time to talk to me about this because it's sometimes a little difficult to talk about the paranormal and it seems like the only time you ever get to talk about it is during Halloween. So
True.
so I really want to kind of get my story out there, talk about my book, and so in 2006 I was on the Discovery Channel's A Haunting, and it was episode 6, season 3, and it was about my house in Salt Lake City in the Avenues. And those houses are, built in like the 1800s. They were the very first homes that were ever uh, built in the Salt Lake Valley. It was during the time of Joseph Smith and Brigham Young. Um, Planting their roots there, building the temple, and a lot of that area was kind of like farm ranch land. It's a Victorian homes up in that area called the Avenues, and so this is my story about living in a house that had over 21 spirits in the home at one time. Now, following the Discovery Channel's A Haunting, about 10 years later, I had the book Harvesting Shadows written by a horror author, Douglas Burchill. And what I did was for 15 months, I was with him on the phone, I was with him through emails and conversations about everything that happened to me in that home. And I told Douglas, I said, I want you to write this book as if you were behind me the whole time. You were experiencing it exactly how I felt it. So this book starts from the beginning, talking about my childhood, the way I was raised. It talks about Matt, how he was raised, and our belief system. And it really brings you on this paranormal journey on how someone that is such a skeptic, which was myself, to now being a major believer. And I want to talk to everyone I can about what happened with me living in that time during the Avenues, and I appreciate this time that you're giving me because it's difficult to talk about sometimes when there's so much to explain about things that you can't see. So
Yeah, I
I'll kind of
understand.
start off with a little bit about what was happening to Matt and I when we first got the house. So we were living in an area, it was called West Jordan. It's kind of like the Central Valley of Salt Lake, and a nice little home community. And we had a break in one night, and there were some things that happened in the neighborhood that I didn't feel comfortable with. And I always kept telling Matt, I was making really good money. I was working at a nightclub and I was working graveyards, and we were making more money than we had previously. And I said, listen, I want my dream home. I want a Victorian home. I always wanted a home in the Avenues, something that kind of reflected a dollhouse that my dad gave me when I was, like 6 years old. And every time you drive by the Avenues, it was like each house has a different architectural design, and it's so
Mhm.
unique. Not like no two houses are alike. So just feeling a little uneasy in that neighborhood all the time. I found out that after the break-in, a couple days later, a man, they believe it was the same one, had broken in and raped a woman that was a couple blocks from us. And so I was completely terrified of the neighborhood. There was a lot of break-ins. It was right next to the Bangor Highway, which is a quick freeway to get on and off. So Matt, he was doing construction work. He was doing finished carpentry in like the Avenues area, Salt Lake City. And he would always drive by the Avenues and just kind of look. And there was not a lot of houses for sale in that area. A lot of people kept those homes. And one day he drove by this house and it looked like it needed a lot of work. And it said it was.
Those are usually the ones that you're like, "Ooh, I want that."
It needed a lot of work. It looked like it had not been loved for quite a while. And so this house was advertised for rent. And so Matt said, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and knock on the door. It looked like some painters were there. And so he knocked on the door, and the painters that were there with one of the owners, we found out later that was the owner, would not let Matt inside. And he was like, I just wanted to kind of look around, get some ideas of, how big this house is, and just to see if it, would suit my family. And they were like basically pushing him out the door. You can't come in. And he noticed when he looked in the hallway, there was some kind of graffiti or words that were on the wall, and they were painting over it. And Matt had mentioned something like someone broke in and painted some graffiti, because it was very large letters that were on the wall. And they said, you can just come back tomorrow when you can set a time. And he was like, okay. And it was just kind of weird because they wouldn't even let him over the threshold. And he's like, it's just paint. I'm not going to touch it. So that was quite a question.
He's like, I'm going.
Yeah. And as he was going outside, he turned around and the painter guy says, you just need to come back tomorrow. And so he said, by the way, it's just because the guy that lived here was a squatter, and he wrote a note on the wall. So we were just painting the walls. And that's what he told Matt. And he was like, a squatter. So, a couple weird things in his mind. So we made an appointment the next day, and Matt says, let's bring the kids. And I want you to see this house. Now, of course, it wasn't for sale, but I want you to see maybe if we can rent it and we'll sell the other home. So we get there in the home. I take a camera because I know from previously there is, it's the Avenues. I've known about hauntings. I'm going to take some pictures of the home. And, back then we just had those disposable cameras where you could just, you have to wait till the film
you have to wait a week for the
is
film
finished
to be developed.
processing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I shot some pictures, walked around. It was cold, of course, because the heater wasn't working. There was no heat in the house. It was very cold. I didn't feel anything. But of course, at that time, I really didn't know what to feel. The kids ran around. They went outside. Matt went downstairs, looked around to see how much work had to be done. So we made an agreement with the owners that we were going to do a lease option for 6 months. So we could do some minimal things and it wasn't really minimal, but like plumbing and heat until the 6 months had passed, because they had a prepayment penalty. Okay. And once the 6 months had passed, then it was ours. So minimal renovations, but just enough to survive, plumbing and heat. So we made an agreement, we signed the documents, and we moved in right away because I didn't want to stay in that house anymore in West Jordan.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of work that needed to be done in the Avenues house. Now, it was a beautiful home, a 3-story home, gorgeous golden brick. The outside looked pretty sad. It needed a lot of help. There was a lot of weeds, and it had been sitting for almost 2 years. So when we first got in the home, of course, I told you I worked graveyards. Shane, at that time, was almost 7. And Nathan, my oldest, was just turning 14. And we had just got into the home, and at night, Shane would start crying and screaming, and he would have night terrors, and he would scream that there was something in his closet. And so Matt would come in there and grab him and try to console him.
Now, is this when he was having these, experiencing this, was this before you guys actually started having any kind of activity going on, or did it all kind of coincide where you were having experiences, Shane was having experiences, and your husband was having experiences?
And I'm glad that you asked that, because it did all kind of coincide. Sometimes to the point where Matt and I were not telling each other what was actually happening. We were hiding it from each other. And the only thing at first was Matt was like, hey, Shane keeps crying. He keeps waking up in the middle of the night, pointing at his closet, something. There's a man in his closet, a man in the wind. And so I've, brought Shane in at night. And when I would come home, it'd be like 3, 4 in the morning. A lot of times I would just go ahead and sleep on the couch because I didn't want to interrupt them, wake him up. He'd been up all night with Shane crying. And so I would usually just come into the house and lay down on the living room couch and wait until the sun rose. And then Matt would make coffee and we would kind of change spots and he would take the kids to school while I slept. So, Shane's terrors were happening a lot more at night. He was crying a lot more. And so I figured I was working 6 nights a week. I would just come home, lay on the couch and wait until morning because it was exhausting for Matt. And I remember waking up, I was just kind of groggy, trying to go to sleep, back and forth, turning the TV on. And I looked out my front window, and in the bottom right corner of my front window, it was like a paned window. I saw a face of someone staring at me through the window.
Yikes.
And I thought, am I dreaming? And then I realized I was awake. So, you kind of have to kind of look again because you're like half awake. And I was like, there's a face, like a little face, like bright white face. And the head was big. It was like a huge man. And so what I did was I got up and I ran and I looked outside. I opened the door and I looked out and I went and looked at the porch and looked down to see who was there. And mind you, the front of the house is over 10 feet tall before the windows even hit.
Oh,
so
wow.
Someone that was peeping in the window had to either be on a ladder or standing on something. There's no way anyone could have looked in that window. Yeah. And I thought, wow, that's crazy, and I'm looking around and that was my first real sight of seeing something. At first it was like Shane crying. You'd hear creaks and cracks, footsteps, maybe a shadow here and there. It was always cold. But this was the first time I actually saw a man staring back at me. And I thought, boy, this is a creeper, a peeping Tom, following me home from work at night, and you kind of brush it off.
Right. But you don't see a ladder or anything.
You don't see a ladder. I don't see anything
up there.
I don't see anything. And so I kept it to myself. I didn't say anything to Matt because I was just stressed. I wanted to go to work. The next day we had a busy weekend. And we were having handyman come over because Matt told me, listen, the basement's only like 5.5 feet tall. He kept hitting his head on the pipes in the basement. So we decided we were actually going to extend the basement by 2 feet, which meant we would have to dig the basement out.
Right.
So we hired a handyman that said that he would help start digging our basement out. And he started digging underneath the stairs. Now, the stairs were underneath the kitchen, and it kind of followed the pipes up through all the bathrooms, okay? And so when the stairs were basically, it was like old pine, and there wasn't even like 2x4s. It was, like built in the 1800s. Everything was falling apart. It was like slivers, Right. And so we said, just take out everything from the stairs, start digging the dirt. We're going to make it a couple feet taller. So the handyman would come to Matt and say, my hands are burning. I'm touching the soil. My hands are burning. And so we thought, maybe there was some acid in the soil, something he was allergic to. We couldn't figure it out. So Matt went down underneath the stairs, grabbed some dirt, and was like, there's nothing in here. And he's like, maybe I need to get the dirt tested. And I said, he's probably just drunk. He doesn't want to work. So
He wants a reason to get out of here.
So he just wants to, because he was showing up a little later, you know, and so we thought that was kind of weird. And so I'm touching it, Matt's touching it, and he said, you know, my hands are burning. And then we had a couple drywallers that were trying to take down a part of the house that we wanted to have more light come in. The windows seemed too dark. There was way too much darkness in the home. We really wanted to brighten it up. And so some drywallers were complaining that every time they tried to push the drywall up into the ceiling, it felt like something was pushing it down again. And it came to the point where the foreman on the job had called Matt and said, my guy broke his wrist because it was too much weight from trying to hang drywall. So we're going to have to take a couple weeks off. And then Matt was like, maybe these guys are drunk too, you know? So
what's going on here?
So it was a pattern. And what we were seeing was people coming into our home were telling us, listen, this is not right. Something's burning. Something's pushing my hands. I'm seeing things. And I thought, that's kind of interesting. So during the time of all this construction, mind you, we're so busy trying to get this house livable. We get this notice in the mail from the Salt Lake County, and they state you have so many weeds in your yard that you're going to have to clean it up because of fire hazards. July was coming up soon. There's a lot of fireworks. And they said you need to clean up all the dead ivy on your house, all the dead trees, or you'll be fined. So I called the owners and said, I got this letter. Even though it's a lease option, I'm willing to pay the cost if you deduct it from the lease option. So they would give me a credit because it costs like almost $1,000 just to take down a tree. So we started taking down trees, shrubs, and the ivy on the side of the house. And as we came around the side of the house, trying to figure out, okay, what is it that we're going to do? How are we going to do this? Matt's going to get up on the ladder and start shaving the ivy off and pulling it off. And as we kind of stood on the side of the house, we saw this like light, like it was a reflection of a window. And there was a window on the side of the house, but there was no window inside the house. And so Matt was like, I think that's coming from our closet. And he always knew that there was some type of 8 to 10 feet attic space that wasn't being used, you know?
Right.
So we started pulling out the ivy and we found this big, beautiful window. And so Matt came upstairs and he's like, it is in the closet. It's in that area. Let's find out where this room is. So Matt goes in the closet, and it's a really small closet, just like a coat closet, which is in the master bedroom. And he starts tearing open that closet. I don't know what he had at the time, maybe a crowbar and a hammer or something. And he's getting in there and tearing open the drywall. Now, as he opens up the closet, he sees this small little door. And it's almost like a doggy door, but a small, skinny person could fit in it, but it was like a child-sized door. And so when he saw that door, he opened it up, and it opened up into like a staircase that was cut off over it was like this, it's hard to explain, but it was like a balcony. Okay.
Right.
So here's this door going into a balcony that goes to a wall. And it's like, why would there be a balcony that doesn't go anywhere? And so on the other side of the wall was the ceiling that went down into the bathroom. Okay. And so we're trying to figure out, why is this, room all weird? But the weirdest part about it was there was all these like children's paintings and these butterflies and just like a child's playroom.
So nobody ever took them down or anything, or covered them or anything. They were just preserved there.
It was just preserved there, and it was like paint. It was not crayons. It was like paint. It was preserved, and I thought, boy, why would someone want to hide a child's playroom? and it's so big. Why would you want to cover this up? So Matt was like, listen, we're going to open this up and make you a beautiful walk-in closet. And let's start tearing this down. So I was like, hey, this is great. So he got on it right away, and he was like, let's start, opening this closet up and noticing that beautiful window. We took the plywood off, opened it up, bright, beautiful window. And that first night that we started tearing down that closet, I was woken up by a hand touching my shoulder. And I heard, Mommy, wake up. And I woke up and I had to sit there and, kind of like, wait a second, that's not my child. There is a child, about a 7-year-old boy, that was standing there at the edge of my bed.
Oh,
and like I try to explain to people, and we talked a little bit about this before, this is real flesh and blood standing at the edge of my bed. This was a real child. This was no shadow. This was no apparition. This was an actual child in my house touching me, trying to wake me up. And I got up and I woke up Matt. Matt, there's someone here. There's the child here in our house. And he got up and he didn't see anything. And he's like, what? I go, there's a child in our house. And he's like, what? It got loose, because we have there's 15 different entrances in the house. There's a basement entrance, a side entrance, the front door, all these windows. And everything wasn't quite secure yet. The doors were hard to shut. And we thought some child had wandered into our home and got lost. So Matt and I got up, went to Nate's room, brought Shane into Nate's room to lay him in his bed and say, listen, we got to go outside. There's a missing child. So just watch your brother. So I think it was maybe 1:00 in the morning. We looked around the house. We had flashlights. We went outside the yard. We're trying to find this kid. We're walking around the neighborhood. I was getting ready to call the police. And I thought, you know what? Maybe it's just one of our neighbors. We didn't really know our neighbors yet. I don't care if it's 1 a.m. and they're mad at me. If their son or child, whatever, walked out of the house
wandering around, yeah,
I'd want to know, right?
Yeah, I'd want to know too.
Yeah, so we knocked on the door next door, because Matt knew the guy was up always late. He was like a professor. He was always up late grading assignments. And he was talking to him about this child and who it belonged to. And he was like, no, all the children here are female on this block. There's no boys. And he's like, but the lady across the street sometimes has her grandson, and she's in almost her 70s, 80s. So maybe she's watching the grandson. So we went across the street. I did, while he was talking to him. And I felt so bad waking this lady up. But I thought, boy, her grandson got out. She was awake. She opened the door and talked to me and told me about what happened with the house. And said, no, there's no little boy there. And there's no boys in this neighborhood. Maybe you should call the police and give them a description. But I think it's what happened to your house was Stephen King filmed The Stand in your house. And I said, what? Stephen King? She said, yeah, the 1990s. Stephen King had filmed The Stand in your house. And she said, I talked to the production team, because they came around to tell all of us for the next month or two, our block was going to be closed off. And she said that they found the house that had the most energy, and that was the house they were going to film in, which was my house.
You're like, gee, thanks for telling me.
I was like, this is crazy. And she's like, no, look at the burn marks on all of the brick in the front of your home. They blew the house up. It caught on fire. They blew it up in the movie. And I was like, yeah, I was wondering about those burn marks. And so I got back and was telling Matt, I was like, Stephen King filmed The Stand in this house. She said that he was doing some seances in the backyard, and they drummed up all this evil stuff during the filming and talking about energy, and I just couldn't stop talking about, what did he do? He brought something in the home. And then Matt says, well, you wait till you hear about what happened to the neighbor. And I said, what happened to the neighbor? And he says, well, the neighbor committed suicide and wrote his suicide note on the wall of our house. And he wrote, "This house murdered me."
Is
And the
that what
next
they were
door,
trying to paint over? Or
that's
was
what
that
they were
something?
trying to paint over. And so Kevin, the next door neighbor, said, "Listen, this guy was squatting in the house. The house went to the bank. He squatted for 18 months. He said he lost his wife. His wife divorced him. They had a daughter, but he turned crazy. He was outside in the middle of the night yelling at the house, saying, 'I know where you are. You're not going to hurt me.'" He said that he let him use extension cord to have power in the house because he felt bad for him. And it was some house flippers that bought it from the bank that we bought it from. So they didn't care about the property. Um, they didn't care about
They didn't
anything.
care
They
what
just,
happened on there. They didn't. They
yeah, they
just
didn't.
like wanted to
Yeah,
sell it.
yeah, they were just wanted to flip it. And in Utah, there's no disclosure for anything about haunted houses or suicides or anything like that. So,
I hear that. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
no, go ahead.
And I've heard the same thing. Real estate agents, they do not have to disclose any of that unless you ask. If you
Yes.
ask them, was this house ever involved in any kind of murder or whatever like that? But anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and that's true. And then a lot of times, you know, I tried searching online too. Okay, I tried searching online to
Right.
see, was there a murder here. There, most of the time police records are not going to put the address back then in the 80s, 70s, whatever, of where the
Right.
murder took place or suicide or death. It's very
Property.
difficult. So, and I'll get back to that when I'm searching the Salt Lake County records. But so here we are. Someone's looking in the windows. We hear, my son's screaming at night. Now we hear Stephen King film The Stand in this house. Now we hear the guy committed suicide. Not in the house, outside of the house. Wrote a suicide letter. All these things are starting to kind of come into play. Like, maybe there's
Right.
something in this house. Okay, but then it's like right after we open that door, now, and I say to everyone, all hell breaks loose. As soon as we open that closet door and start tearing things down, we are starting to get more energy and more things are happening in the house. So here we are again. There's a middle of the night. Matt and I are sleeping in the bed, and we hear these clanging noises, like someone's taken a pipe wrench to these pipes. Bam, bam, bam. So loud that it's echoing all through the stories of the house. And it's coming up through the steam radiators from the boiler system in the basement, okay? And it's in threes. Bam, bam, bam. And it keeps happening. And so we get up and we're running downstairs. Now, when this happened, okay, as we're running downstairs, Nathan, my preteen, just turning teenager, decided he wanted to sleep in the basement at that time when we first moved in, because there was like this nice little shelving and an office area and a private bathroom. And he kind of liked the basement. He didn't care about it. So as we're running downstairs, Nathan is like, "Mom, what's that noise?" The boiler system had been disabled. It had been red flagged from the gas company. It had not been in service in over 15 years. The pipes were completely disconnected. The steam boiler, the pipes, there was no way anything could be happening with those pipes. Matt was like trying to figure it out, like, do we have an earthquake? Is the pipes, like, why is this happening? And so Nate was like, I'm going to go to my upstairs room now. The room that we originally had for him. That next morning, he moved straight into that room. I still, to this day, don't know if he saw something, but he heard it, and we all heard it. And this was the very first time now all of the family had witnessed something together.
Right.
Now, here we are. Again, things are happening. This little boy touches my arm, and I'm telling you, when I saw that child, I kept thinking back in my mind, okay, it can't be Stephen King. It can't be this guy next door. I keep seeing this little boy. Why do I keep seeing this little boy? He's trying to wake me up. And it kept happening again and again. I kept feeling a touch. I kept hearing the words, mommy, waking me up. And a lot of times Matt would hear it too. He would hear mommy, but he wouldn't see anything. So the next couple weeks or so, I was so stressed out from the construction, Shane not sleeping, seeing things, hearing things, finding out about what's happening, coming to the realization that there's actually something in the home. And I was I went online. It was kind of like an Angie thing and had a housekeeper come out.
Right.
And she says, oh, I remember cleaning your house in West Jordan before you left. I'd be more than happy to come out and if I can bring my son, Sebastian. I said, absolutely, you can. He's around the same age as Shane.
Mm-hmm.
So she got cleaning the house, and I was just exhausted from the clanging noises, Shane crying all the time. Matt was up almost every single night, like trying to fight Shane from convincing him nothing was in the house, hearing noises. Like he was fighting all these things that he wouldn't explain to me what was going on. He wanted to keep it quiet because he thought if we poured all of our life savings into this home and then I tell April I saw something in the basement or I think this house is haunted, he's like, it's going to ruin her forever. Like, I'm just not going to tell her that. And I was doing the same thing. Like, I'm not going to tell him I saw this or because he's working so hard to get this place, you know, the heating and air and the plumbing and electrical and the outside. So the book talks a little bit about just kind of everything that's going on. Chaos is what it is. Complete chaos in the house. And
did you ever think that you needed an outside resource to kind of come in and figure out what was the problem, what was going on?
Yeah. So it was like the end of the day and the housekeeper, you know, she's leaving and she's like, I just want to let you know there's a little boy in your garage. And I was like, what? And she's like, no, he's a ghost. And he was playing with Sebastian. And she's also, there is a little boy that's in your backyard and he hangs out in your garage. And I said, like a real ghost? She's like, oh yeah. She's like, absolutely. He's
just a matter of fact.
And see you later. And
yeah, right. Gotta go.
What? What? You know, so if I tell you now, we're going to go back to the first part where I was raised in a strict Mormon family. I was raised, and I'm going to tell you, a bubble of protection, okay, where you don't talk about spirits. Spirits do not exist. Only in two cases. One, if they're like complete evil, they've murdered someone and they're stuck here on earth, they've done something bad, or it's a demon, okay? And the second is if they're basically trapped because they're still addicted to alcohol or drugs or something wrong, they've lied in their life. So they tell you that these spirits are trapped because maybe they were addicted to alcohol. And so they'll stay around bars all the time because they can't escape that addiction. So, and then demons are always portrayed to bring so much fear that if you're living your life wrong, these demons are going to come get you. Satan's going to come get you. So you have all these fear tactics in the religion that I was in, that if you're not paying your tithing, you don't go to church, you don't live by the Book of Mormon, you know, follow the teachings, that Satan's going to get you, these demons are going to get you. And so it was never explained to me on how to fight or how to get rid of a spirit or why is it here in the first place? Like, I didn't know anything at all. So Matt and I started looking online and we got on the computer back then when it was dial up.
Yes.
And
sound it made.
Yeah. And you know, you get a lot of weird things like that didn't quite make sense, but then it did pop up this bookstore, Golden Braid Books, which was right down the street. And it had sage, tarot cards, books about cleansing, crystals. There were psychics there, mediums. And so I thought, I'm going to go to this bookstore and find out and read, how I can get rid of spirits. So I went to the bookstore, and I was talking to the clerk, and he showed me some books. And this psychic lady that was sitting there reading tarot cards kept looking at me. And she was looking next to me. And then she was like, come here, And I thought, oh boy, someone's, some scam artist. Because that's what you're taught is going to come over and say they know all this stuff about me. And I'm like, no. She's like, can I help you with anything? Is there something you need help with? And I was like, oh no, I'm just getting these books on cleansing. I'm learning about sage, salt, how to banish spirits away. And she's all, who was that came in with you? And I was like, nobody came in with me. And she's like, that little boy that's next to you, he's following you around. Was there a recent death in your family? And I was like, no. A little boy. She's like, yeah, but he's soaking wet, but he's following you around.
Wow.
And so then she said, I showed her the books. We had a conversation. She told me basically that there's spirits in the home. It followed me to this bookstore because this little boy knows I'm trying to help it. Trying to help him with whatever it is. She was very loud on the point that you need to get this out of your house. It's not just this little boy, but there's something going on. So I'm like, this lady's real. Like, she saw it. I didn't say anything to her. I just came in this bookstore to try to figure out how to banish spirits. And she said something to me that has stayed with me ever since. And she said, you can read all these books and you can look at all these sayings and you can try to figure it out on your own, but it's your belief system that's the power. And what you believe is your strength. And I thought, well, that's great, because Matt's never gone to church. He doesn't have any platform to believe on. Like, he's never even been in this world of spirits. And he was talking to me about how there were so many scam artists out there, and that when I went to the bookstore, he was like, what did she charge you? So he was a complete skeptic too. So I explained to him, I read the little sage cleansing prayer. I told him what we need to do to cleanse the house. And so we decided we were going to try it. And so, there's a lot of different ways to do it. But the first time, I kept the windows closed. You're supposed to open all the windows.
Yeah.
You're supposed to open all the windows.
Find a way out.
Yeah, so they can find a way out. And you're actually supposed to close all plumbing. So no way to get through pipes. You're supposed to close the toilet, all the sinks.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, so that they won't escape through plumbing. So the first time, we saged, blew the house just full of smoke. I didn't quite know what I was doing. I was saying these prayers that I wasn't sure what I was doing. And, it seemed that after a couple days, there was no energy in the house. And there was nothing going on. And so we thought, oh, we did it. We got rid of it.
It's like high fives all around. We did it.
We did it. We got rid of what was in the house. So, a couple days go by. Shane's having the night terrors again.
Yikes.
Matt's explaining to me that the electrician, we're trying to rewire. The electrical's horrible. I mean, we're trying to get more amps put in the house. And he was telling me that the electrician kept getting bit, which means shocked.
Oh,
and
wow.
Yeah. And so if you watch the Haunting documentary of the Forgotten, you'll see there's part of the episode in there where the electrician, he keeps getting bit. And what happens is he turns off the power, he turns off the breakers, he goes back to work, and it keeps shocking him. And he said to us, you've got something in this house. I've been around this a long time, but you have something in this home. So during this whole time, while I'm working graveyards, Matt's dealing with some kind of a man in a hat in the basement that keeps him away from the boiler. So in the middle of the night, he would wake up because he would hear this voice whisper to him, "Don't mess with it, boy." Kind of a different twang, a different kind of voice he's never heard before. And it kept telling him, "Don't mess with it, boy. Quit messing with the boiler." And Matt would wake up just terrified, like hearing these voices in his head. There was a lot of things that went on in the house that we kind of became used to. Just the noises, the clanking, the footsteps. It's almost like we were just trying to live with the fact that, yeah, our house is haunted. So I finally realized after Matt, one night I came home. I came home from work. It was about 4 a.m. And I'm walking around the side of the house and I see the lights on and in the kitchen, and I see a coffee cup, and he'd always have coffee made usually around 6 or 7 a.m. to start the day. And I saw the coffee cup. I saw a man in a hat, like a cowboy hat, smoking a cigar, which was weird. And I was pissed because I was like, someone's smoking in my house, you know?
What is that?
Yeah, but it was like, it's normal because we had a lot of construction guys coming in the house. We had a lot of handyman. And I thought maybe this guy was coming for the electrical. He's a cowboy dude, you know? But why is he smoking in the house, you know, with the kids? So I come around the side of the house and I'm hot-headed. I'm ready to come in the kitchen and tell him, listen,
I'm ready
get
to
that
like,
cigar out of the house, you know? And as I come around the kitchen, the coffee cup is there. The coffee pot's not on, and there is no one in the house. There's no smoke. The lights were on. And so I thought, that's weird. So I, hello, walked around, didn't see anything, came upstairs. And I was like, Matt, who's in the house? And he was holding his head. And he's like, I don't know. And he looked like he looked like he got hit by something. There was a huge welt on his head, absolutely humongous. And I said, what happened? He said, I hit my head on the pipes last night in the basement. I heard something going on in the boiler, and I went downstairs and I hit my head on the pipes. I couldn't turn the lights on. The lights weren't working. And he goes, that basement with it being so small, I just hit my head and it's taken me a while to wake up. He's like, can you get the kids up? I was like, are you okay? So after we got the kids to school, he told me that he was down there in the basement. He heard the clanging of the noises of the boiler system again. He came down there. He saw a man in a hat in the shadows. He could smell whiskey. He could smell cigarette smoke. As he was running to him, like, who the hell's in my house?
Right.
He hit his head and knocked himself out. For hours and hours and hours, Matt was knocked out downstairs in the basement. And he told me that when he woke up, there was 3 people standing above him. He said there was the man in the hat, a woman, and a child. And then he said he got so scared he ran upstairs. He turned on all the lights, came upstairs, passed out, went to bed, and I came home. And then that's when I called my mom and I said, Mom, I need you to watch the kids for a while. I told her what was going on in the house. We've got to find a way to figure out what's going on in this home, and I don't want the kids here. So she said she would come get the kids. I reached out to a realtor, the one that we were trying to sell our West Jordan home, and I told her everything that had happened, and she told me, listen, there's this woman named Debbie, and she's a clairvoyant, and she's very gifted. She's a medium.
Well, I want to pause here, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, because we only have about 5 minutes left, and I think that this is a good place to stop because I want to have you on again.
Good. Then okay, that's crazy. Has it gone on that long?
Yeah, it's like, well, I'm almost at quarter of, so I want to make sure, because the radio station, has their time limits. But no, because I think this is a good place to stop, because I want to have you back on. I want you to start from when you contacted Debbie, and then, whatever else happened after, and then we can go, because I want to learn more about your story, and I know the listeners are going to want to as well. So
Good.
hopefully
Yeah.
that's okay with you. Maybe like in another week or two, we'll schedule something, and then I would love to have you back on and talk to you about the rest of your story.
Let's do that. And then, so should I end here just talking about where to find my book and some upcoming things happening in March?
Yeah, for whatever time we have left, please talk about your book and where people can find it, because I know people are going to be intrigued by your story.
Okay.
So go ahead.
Okay, so I reached out to my realtor to try to find someone that can help me, and she explained to me she knew a medium, a clairvoyant that was very gifted. And I think that if you have me again, I want to talk to you about everything that happened with the blessing, all the stuff that I learned.
Yeah, because you and I had a conversation, and I know we had a conversation for a while, and you really, there's a lot of important parts to your story that need to be shared. So I want to be able to do that. So
I appreciate that very much, because
I mean, I've told everybody that I've talked to, I'm like, listen, I said, I only have 50 minutes and I would like to be able to get as much in, but if we find we're getting to the end, but there's still a lot to tell, there's a guaranteed part 2 here. So I was going to say, I'm going to go ahead and finish it off here. And I just want to say thank you for being on the show and began your journey. The one thing I will say that intrigued me before I think we ever talked was something you said about everybody has a counselor for all these different things in your life, for divorce, depression, but nobody ever really has a counselor for you to talk to about what you experienced, which was very traumatic. So in order for you to kind of create your own counseling, telling your story has been very, I'm assuming, has been very good for you to kind of get it out and get it out there. And so hopefully I'm on the right track with that.
You are, and I appreciate it, because healing is the most powerful thing, and only you can heal yourself within. And I really want to talk to you more about what I did to heal, living off grid, grounding, talking about energy, and everything that I learned from Debbie, the clairvoyant, and how to cleanse your home. But the most important thing is just to be grateful for everything that you have, because all this world is about is karma and, trapped energy and frequencies, and everything to do with the paranormal is hard to explain, because when you try to talk to, like I said, a counselor or someone about, this is what I saw, and people don't believe you, that's more traumatic.
Yes.
When people don't believe you.
I agree.
And so I think part of this book, part of everything, there's going to be some upcoming stuff about the documentary 20 years from now. I want to talk about that if you have me again soon.
Oh, yes.
And I really appreciate the time. And once again, Harvesting Shadows, you can find it on Amazon and iBook, and also the new audiobook with Annie Waybright as the narrator, you can find on Audible. So it brings the book to life. And thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, no, you're welcome. April, it's been great. I'm definitely going to have you on soon. You're not going to have to wait a long time. I just wish we had more time, because we could sit here for a couple of hours talking about this.
Yes, we could.
We'll have another chance. And I just want to let people know too, April is also going to be like a co-host talking about other things. She and I really had a strong connection when we started talking, and I think it's continued. And so she will be back on some future shows talking about other things, but she will definitely be back again for part 2 for her Harvesting Shadows story. And thanks again. And as I say to my listeners, thank you so much for your support, and you keep on being spooky.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you. You take care.
You too.